German. It isn't at all a becoming language. I know perfectly well that I look quite plain after my German lesson.
Child, you know how anxious your guardian is. You should improve yourself in every way. He laid particular stress on your German as he was leaving for town. Indeed, he always laid stress on your German as he was leaving for town.
Your Uncle Jack is so very serious. Sometimes. He's so serious I think he cannot be quite well.
Your guardian enjoys the best of health, and his gravity of demeanor is especially to be commended in one so comparatively young as he is.
I suppose that is why he often looks a little bored when we three are together.
Cecily, I am surprised at you. Your guardian has many troubles in his life. Idle merriment and triviality be out of place in his conversation. You must remember his constant anxiety about that unfortunate young man, his brother.
I wish Uncle Jack would allow that unfortunate young man, his brother, to come down here sometime. We might have a good influence over him, Miss Prism.
I do not think that even I could produce an effect on a character that, according to his own brother's admission, is irretrievably weak and vacillating. Indeed, I would not desire to reclaim him. I'm not in favor of this modern mania of turning bad people to good people at a moment's notice. As a man sows, so shall he reap. Cecily, put away your diary at once. I really do not see why you should keep a diary at all.
I keep a diary in order to enter the wonderful secrets of my life. If I didn't write them down, I should probably forget all about them.
Memory, my dear Cecily, is a diary that we all carry about with us.
Yes, but it usually chronicles the things that have never happened and couldn't possibly have happened. I believe that memory is responsible for nearly all the 3-volume novels.
Do not speak slightingly of the 3-volume novel, Cecily. I wrote one myself in earlier days.
Did you really, Miss Prism? How wonderfully clever you are. I hope it did not end happily. I don't like novels that end happily. They depress me so much.
The good ended happily and the bad unhappily. That is what fiction means.
I suppose so, but it seems unfair. Was your novel ever published?
Alas, no. The manuscript, unfortunately, was abandoned. I use the word in the sense of lost or mislaid. To your work, child. These speculations are profitless.
But I see Dr. Chasuble coming up through the garden.
Dr. Chasuble, this is indeed a surprise.
And how are we today, Miss Prism? You are, I trust, well.
Miss Prism has just been complaining of a slight headache. I think it would do her so much good to have a short stroll with you in the park, Dr. Chasuble.
Cecily, I have not mentioned anything about a headache.
No, Miss Prism, I know that, but I felt instinctively that you had a headache. Indeed, I was thinking about that and not about my German lesson when the rector came in.
I hope, Cecily, you are not inattentive.
I'm afraid I am.
That is strange. Were I fortunate enough to be Miss Prism's pupil, I would hang upon her lips. I spoke metaphorically, of course. My metaphor was drawn from bees. Mr. Worthing, I suppose, is not returned from town yet.
We do not expect him till Monday afternoon.
Ah, yes. He usually likes to spend his Sunday in London. He's not one of those whose sole aim is enjoyment, as by all accounts that unfortunate young man, his brother, seems to be. But I must not disturb Egeria and her pupil any longer.
Egeria? My name is Letitia, Doctor.
A classical allusion, merely, drawn from the pagan authors. I shall see you both, no doubt, at evensong.
I think, dear Doctor, that I will have a stroll with you. I find I have a headache after all, and a walk might do it good.
With pleasure, Miss Prism, with pleasure. Perhaps we shall go as far as the schools and back.
That would be delightful.
Horrid political economy, horrid geography, horrid German.
Mr. Ernest Worthing has just driven over from the station. He has brought his luggage with him.
Mr. Ernest Worthing, B4, the Albany West. Uncle Jack's brother. Did you tell him Mr. Worthing was in town?
Yes, miss. He seemed very much disappointed. I mentioned that you and Miss Prism were in the garden. He expressed a wish to speak with you privately for a moment.
Ask Mr. Ernest Worthing to come here.
Yes, miss.
I've never met any really wicked person before. I feel rather frightened. I'm so afraid he'll look just like everyone else. He does.
You are my little cousin Cicely, I suppose?
You are under some strange mistake. I'm not little. In fact, I believe I'm more than usually tall for my age. But I am your cousin Cecily. And you, I see from your card, are Uncle Jack's brother, my cousin Ernest. My wicked cousin Ernest.
I have not been wicked at all, Cecily. You must not think I've been wicked.
If you have not been, you've certainly been deceiving us all in a very inexcusable manner. I hope you have not been leading a double life, pretending to be wicked but really being good all along. That would be hypocrisy.
I have been rather reckless.
I'm glad to hear it.
And now that you mention the subject, I have been bad in my own small way.
I don't think you should be so proud of that, though I'm sure it must have been very pleasant.
It is much pleasanter being here with you.
I can't understand how you're here at all. Uncle Jack won't be back till Monday afternoon.
That is a great disappointment to me, for I am obliged to go up by the first train on Monday morning. I have a business appointment that I am rather anxious to miss.
Couldn't you miss it anywhere but in London?
No, the appointment is in London.
Well, I know of how important it is, of course, not to keep a business engagement if one wants to retain any sense of the beauty of life, but still, I think you'd better wait till Uncle Jack returns. I know he wants to speak to you about your emigrating.
About my what?
Your emigrating. He's gone up to buy your outfit.
Well, I certainly wouldn't let Jack buy my outfit. He has no taste in neckties.
I don't think you'll require neckties. Uncle Jack is sending you to Australia.
To Australia? I'd sooner die.
Well, he said at dinner on Wednesday night that you'd have to choose between this world, the next world, and Australia.
Well, Cousin Cecily, the accounts that I've received of the next world and of Australia are not particularly encouraging. This world is good enough for me.
Yes, but are you good enough for it?
I'm afraid I'm not that. That is why I would like to ask you to reform me.
I have no time to reform you this afternoon.
Then would you mind me reforming myself?
It's rather quixotic of you, but I think you should try.
Thank you. I feel better already.
You're looking a little worse.
Well, that is because I am hungry.
Oh, how thoughtless of me. I should have remembered that one was going to lead an entirely new life. One requires regular and wholesome meals.
Could I have a buttonhole first?
Marshall Neal?
No, I'd sooner have a pink rose.
Why?
Because you are like a pink rose, Cousin Cecily.
I don't think it can be right for you to talk to me like that. Miss Prism never says such things.
Well, then Miss Prism is a short-sighted old lady.
Miss Prism says all good looks are a snare.
They're a snare that every sensible man would like to be caught in.
Oh, I couldn't care to catch a sensible man. I wouldn't know what to talk to him about.
You are much too alone, dear Dr. Chasuble. You should get married. A misanthrope I can understand. A womanthrope? Never.
Believe me, I do not deserve so neologistic a phrase. The precept, as well as the practice of the primitive church, was distinctly against marriage.
That is obviously the reason why the primitive church has not lasted up till the present day. And you do not seem to realize, dear doctor, that by persistently remaining single, a man converts himself into a permanent public temptation. Men should be more careful. This very celibacy leads weaker vessels astray.
But is a man not equally attractive when married?
No married man is ever attractive, except to his wife.
And often, I'm told, not even to her.
That depends on the intellectual sympathies of the woman. Maturity can be depended on. Ripeness can be trusted. Young women are green. I spoke horticulturally. My metaphor was drawn from fruit. But where is Cecily?
Perhaps she followed us to the schools.
Mr. Worthing, this is indeed a surprise.
Mr. Worthing?
We did not expect you till Monday afternoon.
I have returned sooner than I expected. Dr. Chasuble, I hope you're well.
Mr. Worthing, I trust this garble blow does not betoken some terrible calamity.
My brother.
More shameful debts and extravagance.
Still leading his life of pleasure.
Dead.
Your brother Ernest dead?
Quite dead.
What a lesson for him. I trust he will profit by it.
Poor Earnest. He had many faults, but this is indeed a sad, sad blow.
Very sad indeed. Were you with him at the end?
No, He died abroad. In Paris, in fact.
Was the cause of death mentioned?
A severe chill, it seems.
As a man sows, so shall he reap.
Charity, dear Miss Prism, charity. None of us are perfect. I myself am peculiarly susceptible to draft. You would no doubt wish me to make a slight allusion to this tragic domestic affliction on Sunday. My sermon on the meaning of manna in the wilderness can be adapted to almost any occasion. Joyful, or as in the present case, distressing. I've preached at harvest celebrations, christenings, confirmations.
Christenings. You mentioned christenings, I believe, dear doctor. I mean, you are continually christening, aren't you?
It is, I regret to say, one of the rector's most constant duties on this parish. I have often spoken to the poor classes on the subject, but they don't seem to know what thrift is.
Your brother was, I believe, unmarried, was he not?
Oh, yes.
People who live entirely for pleasure usually are.
But it is not for a child, dear doctor. No, you see, I would like to be christened myself. This afternoon, if you have nothing better to do.
But surely you've been christened already.
I don't remember anything about it.
But have you any grave doubts on the subject?
I have the very gravest doubts. But if you think I'm a little too old now...
Nonsense. The sprinkling and indeed immersion of adults was common practice in the primitive church.
Immersion? You don't mean to say that...
You need have no apprehensions. Sprinkling is all that is necessary. Or indeed, I think advisable. Our weather is so changeable. At what hour would you wish the ceremony performed?
Oh, I might trot around 5 if that would suit you.
Perfectly, perfectly. In fact, I have a similar case. Twins, in fact, from one of your own, a cottage on your own estate, excuse me. Poor Jenkins the carter, a most hardworking man.
Oh, I don't see much fun in being christened along with other babies. It would seem childish. Would 5:30 do?
Admirably, admirably. But now, Mr. Worthing, I will not intrude into a house of sorrow any longer. I merely wish that you be not too much bowed down by sorrow. What seem to us bitter trials are often blessings in disguise.
This seems to me a blessing of extremely obvious kind.
Uncle Jack! Oh, I'm so pleased to see you back, but what horrid clothes you've got on. Do go and change them.
Cecily!
My child, my child.
Whatever is the matter, Uncle Jack? You look as if you had a toothache, and I've got such a surprise for you. Who do you think is in the dining room? Your brother!
Who?
Your brother, Ernest. He arrived about half an hour ago.
What nonsense! I haven't got a brother.
Don't say that. No matter how poorly he may have treated you in the past, he's still your brother. You couldn't be so heartless as to disown him. I'll tell him to come out. And you will shake hands with him, won't you, Uncle Jack?
These are very joyful tidings.
My brother in the dining room. I don't know what it all means. I think it perfectly absurd.
Ta-da!
Good heavens.
Brother John, I have come up from town expressly to say that I am dreadfully sorry for all the trouble I have caused you in the past, and that I intend to lead a better life in the future.
Uncle Jack, you're not going to refuse your own brother's hand.
Nothing would induce me to take his hand. I think his coming down here disgraceful. He knows perfectly well why.
Uncle Jack, do be nice. There is some good in everyone. Ernest has just been telling me about his poor invalid friend, Mr. Bunbury, whom he goes to visit every so often. And surely there must be good in one who is kind to an invalid and leaves the pleasures of London to sit by a bed of pain.
Oh, he's been talking about Bunbury, has he?
Yes, he's told me all about poor Mr. Bunbury and his terrible state of health.
Well, I won't have him talk to you about Bunbury or about anything else. It's enough to drive one perfectly frantic.
I do admit the faults were entirely on my side, but I find Brother John's coldness to be peculiarly painful, especially considering this is the first time I have come here.
Uncle Jack, if you don't shake hands with Ernest, I will never forgive you.
Never forgive me?
Never, never, never.
Well, I suppose I must then. Algy, you young scoundrel, you must get out of here. I don't allow any Bunbury here.
It's pleasant, is it not, to see so perfect a reconciliation? You've done a beautiful action today, my child.
We must not be premature in our judgments.
But Mr. Ernest's things in the room next to yours, sir. I hope that is all right.
What?
Mr. Ernest's luggage, sir. I have unpacked it and put it into the room next to your own.
His luggage.
Yes, sir. 3 portmanteaus, a dressing case, 2 hat boxes, and an extremely large luncheon basket.
I'm afraid I won't be able to stay for more than a week this time.
Merriman, order the dog cart at once. Mr. Earnest has suddenly been called back to town.
Yes, sir.
What a frightful liar you are, Jack. I haven't been called back to town at all.
Yes, you have.
I haven't heard anyone call me.
Your duty as a gentleman calls you back.
My duty as a gentleman has never interfered with my pleasures in the slightest degree.
I can quite understand that.
Well, Cecily is darling.
You are not to refer to my ward as Cecily. I don't like it.
Well, I don't like your clothes. You look perfectly ridiculous in them. Really, it's quite childish to be in deep mourning for someone who is, in reality, staying with you in your house as a guest for a whole week.
You are not staying at my house as a guest or as anything else. You've got to leave by the 4:05 train.
Well, I certainly wouldn't leave you if you were in mourning. It would be most unfriendly. If I were mourning, I would expect you to stay with me. I would consider it most unkind if you didn't.
Will you go if I change my clothes?
Yes, but if you do not take too long to dress. I've never seen anyone take so long to dress with so little result.
Well, at least I'm not always overdressed as you are.
If I am occasionally a little overdressed, I make up for it by being always immensely overeducated.
Your vanity is ridiculous. Your conduct an outrage, and your presence in my garden utterly absurd. But you have got to leave by the 4:05, and I hope you have a pleasant journey back to town. Your bunburying, as you call it, has not been quite a great success for you.
I think it has been a great success. I'm in love with Cecily, and that is everything. However, I must see her before I leave and make arrangements for another Bunbury. There she is.
Oh, I merely came back to water the roses. I thought you were with Uncle Jack.
He's gone to order the dog cart for me.
Oh, is he going to take you for a nice drive?
He's going to send me away.
Then we've got to part?
I'm afraid so. It is a very painful parting.
It is always painful to part from people whom one has known for a very brief space of time. The absence of old friends one can endure with equanimity, but even a momentary separation from anybody to whom one has just been introduced is almost unbearable.
Thank you.
The dog cart is at the door, sir.
It can wait, Merriman, for 5 minutes.
Yes, miss.
Cecily, I hope I shall not offend you by stating quite openly and frankly that to me you seem to be the very visible personification of absolute perfection.
I think your frankness does you great credit, Ernest. If you will allow me, I will copy your remarks into my diary.
You keep a diary? I'd give anything to look at it, may I?
Oh, no. You see, it is merely a record of a young girl's thoughts and impressions and consequently meant for publication. I hope you order a copy when it appears in volume form. But pray, Ernest, don't stop. I delight you taking down from dictation. I have reached absolute perfection. You can go on. Quite ready for more. Ernest, don't cough. When one is dictating, one should be fluent and not cough. Besides, I don't know how to spell a cough.
Cecily, ever since I first looked upon your wonderful and incomparable beauty, I've dared to love you wildly, passionately, devotedly, and hopelessly.
I don't think you should say you love me wildly, passionately, devotedly, hopelessly. Hopelessly doesn't seem to make much sense, does it?
Cecily!
The dog cart is waiting, sir.
Tell us to come around next week, at the same hour.
Yes, sir.
Uncle Jack would be very much annoyed if he knew you were staying on until next week at the same hour.
I don't care about Jack. I don't care about anyone else in the whole world but you. I love you, Cecily. You will marry me, won't you?
You silly boy, of course. Why, we've been engaged for the last 3 months.
For the last 3 months?
Yes, it'll be exactly 3 months on Thursday.
And how did we become engaged?
Well, ever since Uncle Jack confessed to us that he had a younger brother who was very wicked and bad, you of course formed the chief topic of conversation between myself and Miss Prism. And any man who is much talked about always seems very attractive. One thinks there is something in him after all. I dare say it was foolish of me, but I fell in love with you, Ernest.
And when was the engagement actually settled?
On the 14th of February last. Worn out by your entire ignorance of my existence, I determined to end the matter one way or another, and finally, after a long struggle with myself, I accepted you under the dear old tree here. I bought this little ring in your name, and this bracelet with the true lover's knot I promised you always to wear.
Did I buy these for you? They're very pretty, aren't they?
Yes, you've wonderfully good taste, Ernest. It's the excuse I've given you for leading such a bad life. And this is the box in which I keep your letters.
My letters? But my dear sweet Cecily, I have never written you any letters.
You need hardly remind me of that, Ernest. I remember only too well I was forced to write your letters for you. I wrote 3 times a week, sometimes oftener.
I'd give anything to read them. May I?
Oh no, you couldn't possibly. They'd make you far too conceited. The ones you wrote me after I'd broken off the engagement are so beautiful and so badly spelt. I could hardly read them without crying a little.
But our engagement was never broken off.
Of course it was, on the 22nd of last March. You can see the entry if you like. Today I broke off my engagement with Ernest. I feel it is better to do so. The weather still continues charming.
But Cecily, why did you break it off? What had I done? I'd done nothing at all, Cecily. I am very hurt indeed to hear you broke it off, especially when the weather was so charming.
It would hardly have been a serious engagement if it hadn't been broken off at least once. But I forgave you before the week was out.
And you'll never break off our engagement again?
I don't think I could now that I've actually met you. And there is, of course, the question of your name.
Yes, of course, my name.
You mustn't laugh at me, darling, but it's always been a girlish dream of mine to love someone whose name was Ernest. There's something in the name that seems to inspire absolute confidence. I pity any poor married woman whose husband is not called Earnest.
But my dear sweet Cecily, don't mean to say you couldn't love me if I had some other name?
What other name?
Any name you like. Algernon, for instance.
I don't like the name of Algernon.
Oh, my own dear sweet darling. I don't see any reason you should object to the name of Algernon. It's not at all a bad name. In fact, it's a rather aristocratic name. Nearly half the chaps who get into the bankruptcy court are called Algernon. But seriously, Cecily, you don't mean to say that you couldn't love me if my name was Algie?
I might respect you, Ernest. I might admire your character, but I wouldn't be able to give you my undivided attention.
Cecily, your rector here he is supposed thoroughly experienced in all the rites and ceremonies of the church?
Yes, Dr. Chasuble is a most learned man. He's never written any books, so you can imagine how much he knows.
I must see him at once. On most important christenings. I mean, on most important business.
Oh.
I'll be back in half an hour.
Considering that we've been engaged since February 14th and we only just met today, I think it's a little hard you should leave me so long a time as half an hour. Couldn't you make it 20 minutes?
I'll be back in no time.
What an impetuous boy. I like his hair so much. But I must copy his remarks into my diary.
Miss Fairfax has just called to see Mr. Worthing. On very important business, Miss Fairfax states.
Isn't Mr. Worthing in the library?
Mr. Worthing went over in the direction of the rectory some time ago.
Tell Miss Fairfax to come here. Mr. Worthing's sure to be back soon. And you can bring tea.
Yes, miss.
Miss Fairfax? No doubt one of the good elderly women involved in Uncle Jack's philanthropic work in London. I don't like women who are involved in philanthropic work. It's so foreign of them.
Miss Fairfax.
Pray, let me introduce myself to you. My name is Cecily Cardew.
Cecily Cardew. What a very sweet name. Something tells me we are going to be great friends. I like you already more than I can say. My first impressions of people are never wrong.
How kind of you to like me so much after we've only known each other such a comparatively short time. Pray sit down.
I may call you Cecily, may I not?
Of course.
And you will always call me Gwendolyn, won't you?
If you wish.
Then that is all quite settled, is it not?
I hope so.
Perhaps this might be a favorable opportunity for my mentioning who I am. My father is Lord Bracknell. You have never heard of Papa, I suppose.
I don't think so.
Outside the family circle, Papa, I am glad to say, is entirely unknown. And I think that is quite as it should be. The home seems to me to be the proper sphere for the man. And certainly once a man begins to neglect his domestic duties, he becomes painfully effeminate, does he not? And I don't like that. It makes men so very attractive. Cecily, Mama, whose views on education are remarkably strict, has brought me up to be extremely short-sighted. It is part of her system. So do you mind my looking at you through glasses?
Oh, not at all. I'm very fond of being looked at.
You are here on a short visit, I suppose.
Oh, no, I live here.
Really? Your mother, no doubt, or some female relative of advanced years resides here also.
No, I have no mother, nor in fact any relations.
Indeed.
My guardian, with the assistance of Miss Prism, has the arduous task of looking after me.
Your guardian?
Yes, a Mr. Worthing's ward.
Oh. It is strange to me he never mentioned that he had a ward. How secretive of him. He grows more interesting hourly. I'm not sure, however, that the news inspires me with feelings of unmixed delight. I'm very fond of you, Cecily. I have liked you ever since I met you. But I am bound to state that now that I know that you are Mr. Worthing's ward, I cannot help expressing a wish you were, well, just a little older than you seem to be and not quite so very alluring in appearance. In fact, if I may speak candidly...
Oh, pray do. I believe that whenever anyone has anything unpleasant to say, one should always be quite candid.
Well, to speak with perfect candor, Cecily, I wish that you were fully 42 and more than unusually plain for your age. Ernest has a strong, upright nature. He is the very soul of truth and honor. Disloyalty would be as impossible to him as deception. But even men of the noblest possible moral character are extremely susceptible to the physical charms of others. Modern, no less than ancient history supplies us with many most painful examples of what I refer to. If it were not so, indeed, history would be quite unreadable.
I beg your pardon, Gwendolyn. Did you say Ernest?
Yes.
But it is not Mr. Ernest Worthing who's my guardian. It's his brother, his elder brother.
Ernest never mentioned to me that he had a brother.
I'm sorry to say they have not been on good terms for a long time.
That accounts for it. And now that I think of it, I have never heard any man mention his brother. The subject seems distasteful to most men. Cecily, you have lifted a load from my mind. I was growing almost anxious. It would have been terrible if any cloud had come across a friendship like ours, would it not? Of course, you are quite sure that it is not Mr. Ernest Worthing who is your guardian.
Quite sure. In fact, I'm going to be his.
I beg your pardon.
Dearest Gwendolyn, there's no reason why I should make a secret of it to you. Our little county newspaper is sure to chronicle the fact next week. Mr. Ernest Worthing and I are engaged to be married.
Certainly very curious, for he asked me to be his wife at 5:30 yesterday. If you would care to verify the incident, pray do so. I never travel without my diary. One should always have something sensational to read on the train. I am so sorry, dear Cecily, if it is any disappointment to you, but I'm afraid I have the prior claim.
It would distress me more than I can tell you, Gwendolyn, if it caused you any mental or physical anguish, but I feel bound to point out that since Ernest proposed to you, he's clearly changed his mind.
The poor fellow has been entrapped into any foolish promise. I shall consider it my duty to rescue him at once, and with a firm hand.
Whatever unfortunate entanglement my dear boy may have gotten into, I'll never approach him with it after we're married.
Do you allude to me, Miss Cardew, as an entanglement? You are presumptuous. On an occasion of this kind, it becomes more than a moral duty to speak one's mind. It becomes a pleasure.
Do you suggest, Miss Fairfax, that I entrapped Ernest into an engagement? How How dare you? This is no time for wearing this shallow mask of manners. When I see a spade, I call it a spade.
I am glad to say that I have never seen a spade. It is obvious that our social spheres have been widely different.
Shall I lay tea here as usual, miss?
Yes, as usual.
Are there many interesting walks in the vicinity, Miss Cardew?
Oh yes, a great many. From the top of one of these hills quite close, one can see 5 counties.
5 counties? I don't think I should like that. I hate crowds.
I suppose that is why you live in town.
I had no idea there were any flowers in the country.
Oh yes, flowers are as common here, Miss Fairfax, as are people in London.
Personally, I cannot understand how anybody manages to live in the country, if anybody who is anybody does. The country always bores me to death.
That is what they call agricultural depression, is it not? I hear the aristocracy are suffering very much from it at present. It is almost an epidemic amongst them, I'm told. May I offer you some tea, Miss Fairfax?
Thank you, detestable girl, but I require tea.
Sugar?
No, thank you. Sugar is not fashionable anymore.
Cake or bread and butter?
Bread and butter, please. Cake is rarely seen in the best houses now.
Hand that to Miss Fairfax.
You have filled my tea with lumps of sugar, and though I asked most distinctly for bread and butter, you have given me cake. I'm known for the gentleness of my disposition and the extraordinary sweetness of my nature, but I warn you, Miss Cardew, you may go too far.
To save my poor, dear, innocent, trusting boy from the machinations of any other woman, there are no lengths to which I would not go.
From the moment I saw you, I distrusted you. I felt that you were false and deceitful. I am never deceived in such matters. My first impressions of people are invariably right.
It seems to me, Miss Fairfax, that I've trespassed on your valuable time. No doubt you have many other calls of similar character to make in the neighborhood.
Ernest! My own Ernest!
My sweet Gwendolyn.
A moment. May I ask if you're engaged to be married to this young lady?
To dear little Cecily, whatever would have got that idea into your pretty little head?
Thank you. You may.
I knew there must have been some kind of misunderstanding. The man whose arm is present round your waist is my guardian, Mr. John Worthing.
I beg your pardon?
This is Uncle Jack.
Jack! Oh.
Here is Ernest.
Cecily!
A moment. May I ask you, are you engaged to be married to this young lady?
Good heavens! Gwendolyn!
Yes, to good heavens, Gwendolyn. I mean, to Gwendolyn.
No, of course not.
Thank you, you may.
I felt that there was some slight error, Miss Cardew. The gentleman whose arm is at present round your waist is my cousin, Mr. Algernon Moncrief.
Algernon? Oh! Are you called Algernon?
I cannot deny it.
Oh, is your name really John?
I could deny it if I liked. I could deny anything if I liked. But it is. It has been John for years.
A gross deception has been practiced on both of us.
My poor wounded Cecily.
My sweet wronged Gwendolyn.
You will call me sister, will you not?
There is just one question I would like to be allowed to ask my guardian.
An admirable idea. Mr. Worthing, there is just one question I would like to be permitted to put to you. Where is your brother Ernest? We are both engaged to be married to your brother Ernest, so it is a matter of some slight importance to us to know where your brother Ernest is at present.
Cecily, Gwendolyn, it pains me very much to be forced to speak the truth. In fact, it is the first time in my life I have ever been reduced to such a painful position. But I have no brother Ernest. I've never had a brother, and I haven't the smallest intention of ever having a brother in my life.
No brother at all?
None.
Had you never a brother of any kind?
Not even of any kind.
I'm afraid it is quite clear, Cecily, that neither of us is engaged to be married to anyone.
This is not a pleasant position for a young girl to find herself in.
Let us go into the house. They will hardly venture to come after us there.
No, men are so cowardly, aren't they?
This ghastly state of things is what you call bunburying, I suppose.
Yes, and a perfectly wonderful Bunbury it has been.
Well,
The most wonderful Bunbury I've ever had in my life.
Well, you've no right to bunbury here.
That is absurd. One has the right to Bunbury wherever he chooses. Every serious Bunburyist knows that.
Serious bunburyist, good heavens.
Well, one must be serious about something if he wants to retain any amusement in life. What you're serious about, I haven't got the slightest idea. About everything, I should suppose. You have an absolutely trivial nature.
The only slight satisfaction I have of this whole wretched business is that your friend Bunbury is quite exploded. You won't be able to run down in the country quite so often as you used to. Quite a good thing, too.
Your brother is a little off color, isn't he, dear Jack? You won't be able to run down to town as often as your wicked custom was. And not a bad thing, either.
As for your conduct to Miss Cardew, it's quite inexcusable. To say nothing of the fact that she is my ward.
I can see no possible defense for you deceiving a brilliant, thoroughly experienced young woman like Gwendolyn. To say nothing of the fact that she is my cousin.
Well, I see no chance of you ever being engaged to Cecily.
I don't think there is much likelihood, Jack, of you and Miss Fairfax ever being united.
Well, that's no business of yours.
If it was my business, I wouldn't talk about it. It's very vulgar to talk about one's own business. Only stockbrokers ever do that. And then only at dinner parties.
How can you sit there, calmly eating muffins, when we are on this horrible mess? I can't make out. It seems to me to be perfectly heartless.
When I'm in trouble, eating is the only thing that consoles me. And indeed, when I'm in very great trouble, I refuse anything except food and drink. Besides, we are in very, very great trouble right now, and I made muffins. I'm also very fond of muffins.
I say it's perfectly heartless of you under the circumstances.
Ah, I see. But I'm still going to eat these muffins. They're very good muffins.
Well, there's no reason you should eat them all in that greedy way.
I really wish you would have tea cake instead. I don't like tea cake.
Good heavens, I suppose a man can't eat his own muffins in his own garden.
But I thought you said it was perfectly heartless eating muffins at all.
I said it was perfectly heartless of you under the circumstances.
Yes, but muffins are the same.
Algie, I wish to goodness you would go.
You can't possibly ask me to go without me having dinner. Nobody ever does that. Least of all, not me. Only vegetarians and people like that leave for dinner. Besides, I've just made arrangements with Dr. Chasuble to be christened at 6:15.
The sooner you give up this nonsense, the better. I have made arrangements myself with Dr. Chasuble to be christened at 5:30. To take the name of Earnest. Gwendolyn would wish it. Also, there's no evidence saying that I have ever been christened before in my life, and Dr. Chasuble thinks so as well. You, however, have been christened.
Yes, but I have not been christened in years.
Yes, but you have been christened. That is the important thing.
Yes, so I know that my constitution can stand it. If you're not quite sure about you ever being christened, I do say I think it very dangerous you venturing on it now. It might make you very unwell. You need hardly forget that someone very closely connected to you was nearly carried off this week in Paris by a severe chill.
Yes, but you said a severe chill wasn't hereditary.
It used to be, but I dare say it is now. Science is always making wonderful improvements on things.
Algie, for the final time, go.
I don't think I will. I've not quite finished my tea, and there are still quite a few muffins left.